Hey, we are live.
Am I going back on camera?
You can turn your camera back on. Hello, welcome to part 3 of our discussion on creating welcoming spaces for people living with HIV. This is the third discussion that we have had. If you want to go back and check out the other ones after this broadcast is done, ideally, you can go back and look for those. Also, the posts that that accompanied them, you can go back and look for those as well. They're really important as a sort of a starting framework for where we're going now. So if you missed them, I do encourage you to go back and take another look. My name is Tanya Mushano. I'm the community developer here at Elevate NWO. And joining me today for this discussion on social stigma, stigma by association, and internalized stigma is our wonderful caseworker and research coordinator, Jasmine Cottenham. Jasmine, I'll let you introduce yourself.
Hi, everybody. Jasmine Cottenham. Absolutely wonderful to be here today. I look forward to a conversation. A lot of the research that I've done over the last 10 years is solely focused, well, actually all of it is solely focused on the social determinants of health, which is a specific type of research. So I can bring some information about that and how it relates to the work that I do in community as a caseworker at Elevate NWO that serves people living with at risk for HIV and hepatitis C.
Great, thanks, Jasmine. I was wondering, actually, before we get started with what the post content covered, since really like so much of stigma is caught up in social determinants of health, can you just briefly define what that means, just for folks who may be unfamiliar with that phrase?
Okay, so it's ultimately social equity. It's where somebody is standing in society. So the social determinants of health can look at things like housing, relationships, income, access to friendships and social supports, those types of things.
Okay, thank you.
In a very basic way. I mean, I've explained that. I could get into it quite deeply, but that's a good basic way of explaining it.
Yeah. And Google is available if people want to look for more information on that.
Or email me, either or.
Yeah. Okay, so last week we talked about institutional stigma. And so this week we're going to be talking about social stigma, internalized stigma, and stigma by association. So social stigma is the stigma that people feel within their social relationships and interactions. And the stuff that I'm talking about now comes directly from the post that we made on Tuesday. So I just wanted to go over that a little bit. So yeah. So sometimes social stigma is related to a person's actual HIV status, and sometimes it's related to beliefs and judgments about a person's behavior and their perceived risk of contracting HIV. So it can go either way. Sometimes people are stigmatized because of what they do, and sometimes people are stigmatized because of their actual HIV status. Internalized stigma is self-stigma. It refers to having a negative self-conception based on the shame and the blame that are often just really heaped onto people living with HIV. People internalize the negative messages that they've received over time through various sources, popular culture, sexual health classes, education classes, ideas about sex and the consequences of sex, drug use, etc., and what it means to have HIV. Stigma by association refers to the stigma that is felt by people who are associated with a person or group who are affected by stigma. So it's like, stigma once removed a little bit.
Stigma's ugly cousin?
What's that? Like your cousin?
Stigma's ugly cousin, yeah.
Stigma's ugly cousin, yes. And an example of that one, so that there's like a lot less research or like data around stigma by association than there is around, we know a lot more about how social stigma and internalized stigma work, but an example of stigma by association might be, so we here at Elevate hear from people who maybe are reluctant to come through our doors, to be seen coming through our doors, because people will assume that they are living with HIV, or people will know by the fact that they're coming to get service from us that they are living with HIV. regardless of the fact that we do other things beyond providing HIV treatment. We do Hep C, we do harm reduction, we do all kinds of stuff. But there is this association with us, and it can be stigmatizing for people. So that's an example. But really today, what we're really going to focus on is the first two, is the social stigma and internalized stigma, because those are the ones that are that really, really negatively impact people's health and well-being generally. So I wanted to ask you, Jasmine, a little bit about what you've seen in your research about the ways that people have been affected by, like, when they disclose their status or when their status becomes known. How are people's social relationships impacted?
Well, I think ultimately, I mean, we can look at this two ways, because I tend to do research from a strengths-based perspective. So I'm more interested in how people have positive outcomes with that. But a lot of people are, they lose their social network. I was going to get you to repeat the question again. I apologize, but just the last part of it.
Yeah, just some of the impacts that people that people living with HIV face when they disclose their status. How does that impact the relationships that they have?
Very negatively. It absolutely can. I mean, there have been, situations where people have actually been embraced by community, by their family and their loved ones, and their health outcomes will turn out better. Their whole lives turn out better. When people are not, the information is, received from people that love and care for them in a negative way, it takes away their community from them, and their health outcomes get poor. There's a lot of depression. People don't want to return to work. People don't thrive.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. There are ways that it acts really in very obvious ways, where people are outright rejected, or they're ostracized by their family or ostracized by their community, or we hear about people getting from northern communities getting like thrown out and forced to come down to urban centers where they have no connections and no supports, or people facing violence. I used to work in Southern Africa, and it was so common for when a woman was diagnosed with HIV, for her husband to blame her entirely for it, and leave her, or beat her up, or to completely disconnect her from the rest of her family. So there are these really obvious negative outcomes, but there's also less obvious stuff that happens that in other contexts, like, to borrow a term from anti-racism work, that we might consider something like a microaggression, where people come across oh, well, you can eat with us, but I'm going to give you paper plates instead of a china plate, or things like that. What's that?
So that's just really, really sad. And I mean, I'm sorry to cut you off there, but it really seems like there's been a missed opportunity for education on what living with HIV is. I mean, there is absolutely no way that you can get HIV from a dish, and there isn't. And it just seems like when you're saying that there seems to be like quite a bit of dated education that has been perpetuated over the last 30 years. I mean, a lot has changed. Yeah, and so I mean, it's the pushing of that. And I mean, sorry, I don't know why my phone is buzzing like this. I'm actually going to go throw it in the other room. I'm pretty angry at it.
That is totally fine. This is the life we are living. This is the world we are in now, where
and I had it on silence, and it was just going. So it's what that sounds to me is that yes, these things happen, and whatever the education was, and like in the late 80s and early 90s, where people didn't know. I mean, science evolves, and things have changed. And, you know, treating people that way back then wasn't okay, and it's not okay now, but it's extra not okay now because we know better.
Yeah, we literally have all of the resources at our disposal in order to correct that information. Yeah, but there still seems to be a lot of resistance to.
There is a lot of resistance. Yeah.
A lot of resistance, a lot of residual fear for some reason. That and I mean, maybe this is like a bit of like what's happening in our times, where people don't trust experts, and there's so much misinformation, and now we like have this feeling where we can't trust science. I don't know. No, I'm just thinking out loud. But
no, that's a beautiful thing. I mean, if we want to connect this to, you know, COVID-19 or the coronavirus 19, SARS. I mean, absolutely. I can remember, you know, medical professionals showing people how to wash their groceries. Yeah. And I mean, you know, yes, absolutely. Right. And then, you know, there was recommendations around masks and not recommendations around no masks. And then there was, you know, you need to do this. And I mean, science is evolving, and it's not like anything has really changed beyond the information that has changed. You know, and HIV has been around, what is it, 30, 40 years now? Like, you know, a lot has changed, but people are still being stigmatized and treated really poorly, because maybe the education hasn't come out, or well, I mean, there's a lot of other things to consider as well. I mean, HIV thrives where social injustices persist. I mean, everybody hears me say this constantly. But yeah, I really think, you know, if we look at stigma and what it is, it's, you know, lack of information and discrimination. And I mean, you know, and responding from a place where you don't have the information, and perhaps maybe aren't willing to learn new information. And I would just call that ignorance. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's maybe a little dramatic, but we all know how I roll, so.
Well, I mean, the thing is the information is really out there. It's very, very out there. So if people need to know, but I mean, sometimes people don't know what they don't know.
Yeah, absolutely.
But like, things change, and we need to be aware that things change all the time. And if you know, if we're in a social service, and we understand that, you know, theories around I don't know, mental health change all the time, then we also have to understand that theories and science around the other things that we don't come into contact with all the time also change all the time.
Absolutely.
I want to shift a little bit to internalized stigma, and how that can impact a person's ability to even access services in the first place. And I'm just wondering what stories you have heard, or what people have told you about that. I mean, I know from my own experiences of speaking to people.
No, one of the saddest things I hear, and my friend Doris Pelche, who works at the Canadian Aboriginal AIDS Network, has spoken to this several times, and I hear it all the time, is when I hear somebody say, well, I'm HIV. And then there's usually a reason for, you know, why they can't do something in their life. First and foremost, nobody is HIV. They're living with HIV. And yeah, it actually, for some reason, they've knocked themselves down on the whatever ladder it is of success that they're climbing, for some reason that they can't get past that. I know people who actually keep their social circles incredibly small, because they don't want to disclose to somebody. I know people that hide their medications. I know people that are in relationships with other people who have they've not disclosed their HIV status, and I mean, for all the reasons they may not have to. It's not relevant. I know people that won't tell their family about it because they're afraid that they're going to lose that.
Mhm.
And I think it's fear, and it's everything that's been projected out, brought in where they don't feel comfortable enough to talk about their own wellness. And these are people who, you know, regularly see medical professionals, who go to therapists, who do all the things that we're supposed to do to keep ourselves well. I mean, those are very normal things that everybody should do, by the way. And yeah, the stigma just like holds them back. The internalized stigma, it holds them back from being who they want to be, and for some reason they just don't seem to think it's an obtainable goal, because they have because they're living with HIV.
Yeah.
Does that make sense? I don't know, because I kind of like, I get really sad when I hear about this. It's you know, I've been working in this community for a considerable amount of time, and I have my own experiences that I bring into it, and I've talked about this before. One of the saddest things that I hear somebody say, it's also the most beautiful compliment, is that I just feel like a normal person around you, and I'm like, oh, of course you're just a normal person. I mean, I'm probably the weirdo here, but like, wow.
Yeah.
Look at that. You very rare. I'm tearing up a little bit here. So it's heartbreaking. And I, you know, and when we're talking about internalized stigma, and we're talking about, you know, people not wanting to be associated with this, I really just want to stop and pause. I have friends that are living with HIV who are professors. I have friends who are living with HIV that are in university and are going to be professors. I have friends living with HIV who are hairstylists. I have friends living with HIV who are moms. I have friends living with HIV who are on social assistance and making that, you know, go. And I have friends living with HIV that, you know, don't have all these things. So it's not like HIV stops somebody's full potential, but it's how people respond to people living with HIV, and their social group and their social networks, that help them achieve whatever they want. And you know what? Being a mom at home, living with HIV, if that's your goal, then that's beautiful too. It's that there's not like a spectrum of like, oh, well, you know, you didn't live up to a potential. If you're not living up to your own potential, then you're probably like, or they're probably experiencing some internalized stigma that's getting in their way. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. So what are we, like, that makes me think that we as service providers are not doing something that we should be doing. Like, what are we not doing in order to, like, what ways do we need to encourage people? Like, what do we need to be doing better?
Okay, well, service providers are absolutely fantastic. They're just wonderful people, and they're wonderful that we have organizations to support people navigate their way through a million different systems. I mean, you know, speaking to how high the stigma of living with HIV is, I mean, there's AIDS service organizations specifically for this. And the word AIDS is in there just because AIDS is in there because that's how it was funded a million years ago. I'm really going to challenge them to change that, but here we go. Nobody really, like, social services are great, but what they're there for is for people who don't have those 5 friends in their life. And I know you've heard me talk about this, and everybody needs 5 awesome people on their team. Maybe 7, maybe 20 if you can pull it off. But if we all have 5 people on our team to support us, that's great. So if you're asking what the issue or what social service agencies aren't doing, is they aren't supporting people to create their own social networks.
Right.
Or their own support networks. You know, I will answer some texts in the evening, and it's just me. You know, I might get told, I think I talked to you about this earlier, that I might have, you know, some unhealthy boundaries about doing that. That's my own choice, and it's the pandemic and all the good things. But agencies are 9 to 5 or they're 24 hours, but they're, you know, specific niches, right?
Yeah.
People, and people access services because they don't have someone else to help them navigate through the system. So realistically, to support somebody is to help people create their own circle, their own people that they can work out, reach out to, and also, I mean, on that note, their own people that they can support thrive as well. Right. So social service agencies are fantastic and great, but they need to support people to build community a lot better and to support relationships. Now, that is a giant overarching thing that we can say. And I mean, like, I have personally burned my own bridges with people because of whatever reasons that I have over the years. I'm sure we all have severed relationships, or whatever. And sometimes, like that isn't obtainable, and these agencies are there for that. And that's okay. I mean, life happens and things get in the way and all of these things, but just to help people connect to other people. It breaks my heart when someone says, I don't have anyone else to really talk to but you guys.
Yeah.
Does that make sense?
Yes, it does.
Okay.
And I think that's where representation comes in, and where we need peer networks, and where we need to build, where people need to be able to be open enough and feel like they can talk about their HIV status or their Hep C status or whatever it is, so that people can start to build those social connections.
Yeah, and I mean,
with someone else who's going to be able to relate.
Absolutely. And I mean, I can talk like public health and all of that is usually about prevention. And if we were to look at this a little bit different, I mean, everybody's caught the flu or a cold or something like that. If we were to approach it from you might get some stuff, and there are treatments for that. So it's more of a health promotion projection of that. Does that make any sense? That would be very helpful with stigma. I mean, the prevention messages, even with COVID-19, are scary as heck. Where I'd rather hear like, well, if you're not well, stay home, and the new, it's healthy to do this, and if you get into contact with people, like, this is all the COVID things. I don't even want to talk about them. I'm so tired of it. But we all are. But to take a more health, like these things might happen. This is how there are treatments for it. There are ways to manage this.
Right. Strengths-based. I mean,
I keep asking, does that make sense? Because I know that I talk really fast.
Yeah. No, but what I mean, you were talking about earlier about how a lot of your research is dealing with is strengths-based, is looking at things from a strengths-based, and that really is what that is all about. Is saying that, like, we understand that sometimes things happen, and here's what you can do in that situation, instead of saying, oh, don't do that, don't do that, don't do that, or putting the fear of God into people. It's about, we know that you know how to manage your life, and
we know you're going to make the best choice for yourself in the moment. And I also, I mean, this is the one thing that I think that I like about COVID is, like, I know every one of us has broken a rule at some point, okay, of the social norms of, like, keep your physical distance. There, in the last 9 months, you have snuck in a hug or whatever, Tinder date, I don't know, like something, right? And to say, oh, well, you had the tools and you had the education not to do this, but it happened anyway. I mean, we're human. We make the best choices for ourselves in the moment. Things happen, and nobody contracted, I hate that word too, and nobody got HIV, on purpose, and they didn't do anything wrong, and they're not stupid. It just happened. It just happened. And somebody's going to do a hell of a lot better if you remove that judgment. I cringe when I have never asked somebody, how they became HIV positive. It's really none of my business. If they want to share that information with me, that is a powerful story that will never be repeated. Yeah. And it's just not a question you ask. No. Yeah.
There's a really good.
It's like asking an overweight person. I mean, and we're all overweight or underweight or whatever. We all have our things, but it's just like, oh, do you just eat junk food?
Yeah. No. I mean, there's really no other illness that we blame people for in the same way that we blame people for.
Yeah, I know, and I've seen people go through this, like, you know, up and down with it, and people have a lot of anger towards themselves, and oh, I should have known better, and all those things. That's kind of just circling back to the internalized stigma. You didn't make a mistake, you know. Here we are, right? We're going to deal with it. You're accessing treatment, which, by the way, and I will pump this every time. If somebody is on effective treatment and they have achieved an undetectable viral load, the virus is not transmittable to another person.
Yes.
I have to get that in there a million times. So you cannot get it from a fork or a paper plate or sex.
Yes.
Okay. So
yes.
And there's a really
sorry.
Yeah, there's a really good comedian, and I can't quite remember his name. I think his name is Jamie. And he's a publicly disclosed HIV positive gentleman, and he always says that the only thing you might catch from me is a really good time.
Yes, exactly. Yeah. And for people, so we did talk about this at the very first one, but if you missed the first one, an undetectable viral load, I'll just talk about very briefly what that is.
Mm-hmm.
So when somebody is living with HIV, or when you have any virus actually in your blood,
Mm-hmm.
in your body, it's there, it's detectable on a test, we can find it. When somebody is on treatment, their viral load, so the amount of virus in their blood, goes down. And when it gets down past a certain point, it can no longer be detected on tests, the tests that we do to look for the virus. And at that point, they're considered to be undetectable. And so as long as someone, can maintain their treatment and stick to their treatment and maintain this undetectable viral load, then yeah, they will not transmit HIV to their partners, to anyone they have sex with.
Mm-hmm.
And yeah. And even like if it's just really, really low, also, like we know that's true.
1,500 copies or less.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. From my understanding, unless science has changed since I read up on it a year ago.
Yeah. So as long as someone's it's low or undetectable, obviously is the ideal that you want to stay at, because also it helps with other improvements in your health and keeping your immune system strong and keeping you from, being susceptible to other illnesses. And, regular sort of normal lifespan, normal quality of life, all of these things. But the trick is to be able to stick to it and get onto treatment in the first place and have access to that in the first place. And that's where stigma really gets in the way for a lot of people.
Yeah, a lot of people don't want to go to a doctor. They don't, well, first and foremost, there could be some internalized stigma. And I mean, lots of people have all kinds of illnesses that choose not to deal with them until they're ready. And I think we should all just be kind and compassionate about that. And also just to say, if somebody doesn't want to be treated, they don't have to. Like that's super important. People have a right to self-determination in their own health journey. But if somebody has taken an HIV test and has tested positive, that they do, that they can access treatment. Sometimes stigma gets in the way because they don't want to be seen going to these clinics. They don't want to and these clinics, and it's just because it is a specialized care. I mean, we live in a different world now where people can access over the phone and all of that. They don't want to get blood work. I have somebody that I care for very, very deeply, who went to get blood work here locally, and somebody had written pink CIB on it with a marker, like a highlighter. And CIB stands for contains infectious blood. So they're sitting out in the lab area waiting. This is pre new protocols of COVID. And nobody else would probably understand that. But this person, works in health and knew what that was, and was super afraid that anybody else sitting around them would also see that. And this person does a good job and is pretty good at navigating the health. And they had to ask a friend to go with them next time for blood work, because it hurt them so much, and they cried and just felt like crap about themselves. Yeah. And sometimes blood work got delayed.
Yeah.
And that sucks.
And now this is a person who is doing pretty well and fairly stable, and you know, works in healthcare, and is like, now imagine if there are other layers on top of that there are already barriers.
Yeah.
You know, this is why people don't access or can't. It's not a question of don't, it's that they can't, because
this is why I attend medical appointments with people or on the phone, and I shouldn't have to be there to like, don't be a jerk.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
But here I am. I mean, what a weird job that I have to, like, in casework, you know, is to support people navigating, you know, through complicated systems. And then once they get there, that the helpers or the systems or the people that are supposed to love them are not treating them well. So they have to have me there to fight for them. Like, it's like I'm fighting on both sides. It's not cool. No.
And we were talking about this earlier, how people then, like, if someone is you know, Indigenous or living in extreme poverty or homeless or using substances, any of these other identities that push you further down on the totem pole. What's that?
Vulnerable people.
Yeah, vulnerable people, or, you know, purposefully marginalized people is a term that I've heard recently that I really like.
I like that.
That I don't now I've forgotten where I was going with that, but that you can't always tell. You were saying people can't always tell where the discrimination is coming from.
Are you treating me shitty because I'm an injection drug user, or are you treating me shitty because I have HIV?
Right.
Or is it like an all around thing?
Yeah.
Yeah. And I think like my advice for that one is, you know, this is something else I hear people talk about all the time, and I argue all the time with people. It's kind of fun for me, and I love it, and I love a good argument back. So just so you guys all know, you want to argue back with me, I love it. But when people talk about, oh, well, you know, I'm going to let them keep their dignity, or like, you know, like, we need to give people their dignity. And I hear what they're saying, and they're like, okay, yeah, you know, we have to make sure people are being treated nice. But I'm really going to challenge anybody who has that thought and that framework of, you need to be dignified in how you respond to that person. Right? That person always has their dignity. You can't take that from them. However, you can be very undignified.
Right. Yeah.
So
I think that's a much more useful and accountable way to look at it. Yeah. It holds us to us as service providers and as people, really people in the world. It holds us to a standard. Yeah. Well, and sort of takes away that, like, paternalistic.
Yeah, well, it's like, oh, well, that person still deserves dignity because, you know, they're whatever. It's like, actually,
like, well, they have it already.
They have it. They do.
Mm-hmm. They never lost it.
Yeah, you might be undignified though. Not you. Yeah.
Yeah.
So we're having all this conversation, and earlier I had talked about a video, just because this is kind of going in a really negative way, and we can talk about all the ways that people are crappy, and how internalized stigma is crappy, and social stigma is crappy, and all of those other things. But I mean, like, there's not, like, that's great. We all know things are crappy. You know, maybe we should, you know, kind of talk about how to not have things crappy, or examples of really, really positive experiences. I had sent you an ad for a pharmaceutical company that I think nailed it. And I don't know, maybe you'd be willing to show it.
I can, yeah. I'm gonna. Yeah. I've never done that before.
Okay, so well, if not, we'll put it in the links. But I think you can do it.
I think I can do it. I believe in myself. Oh, that didn't do it.
Okay, yeah, I think you just go to share screen.
Us. Okay.
Go to share screen.
I'm doing
it. Queen of Zoom.
Sharing. Making it big, and we're gonna play it.
It's only a minute.
Can you hear it?
No, turn on the volume.
I feel like there's another thing I needed to do.
Oh, maybe touch the volume? No? I'm pointing at it like you can see it.
Can you hear it? Okay. I think there's another thing I have to do.
Okay. You can put in the links too.
I'm going to try it one more time.
Okay.
Yes, here it is. Share sound. Sorry for the thumping. My kids came home from school.
Right on.
Oh, we just talked about that. And then I said sorry anyway. Oh,
I told you not to apologize.
I know, I know. Yes,
You're living at work.
School. Yes.
You
Okay,
are living at work. They come home. There you go.
Can you hear it now?
Mm-hmm.
Good.
There's nothing to see here. No tears, no shouting, no drama. The world isn't ending. Hearts haven't broken. They're just people living.
2 for a pound, 2 for a pound.
Living lives filled with fun and laughter.
I know you probably wanted half a pint, didn't Come on.
With frustrations and worries.
What do you mean?
People getting on with
Just get off the bus
life.
and run.
Because people living with HIV are just that. People living like anyone else. And now there's something new you should know about HIV. A simple, happy fact. Thanks to effective treatment, a person with HIV whose viral load has reached and maintained an undetectable level cannot pass the virus on to anyone else. So there's nothing to see here, just people living.
Super good.
Super good.
Super good. And I mean, I think that's the trick. I mean, we just really just need to support people to live. We need people to support people to live and be loved, and to help people find those people that love them, and support people to take care of their health, and to invest in their own health, and to understand their health. I think it's super important to, I don't even know the word, to support people to not have to have those conversations. I mean, you may not know this, or maybe you do. Asking people living with HIV to educate you with HIV can be very stigmatizing. If you have any questions, Tanya is brilliant. There's a whole education department at Elevate that you can reach out to. You can ask caseworkers. You can. I'm just trying to provide some support here. Of if you have questions, if you know somebody who is living with HIV, or you have some questions about HIV, you can Google.
Yeah.
You can pose it to the person if you do know somebody of like, oh, I think I need to learn more about this. I'm curious about this. They may or may not tell you. They don't have to. It's exhausting.
Yeah.
But there are other people, and there are amazing resources out there.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think it's also like looking at it in the way, how would you support someone if they told you that they had diabetes or cancer or something like that? How, I mean, you wouldn't start with, how'd you get it? Am I going to get it? Are you going to die? You don't, those aren't the questions that you lead with.
Mm-hmm.
You lead with, are you okay? What do you need? Can I make you a
That's
casserole? Yeah. How are you feeling with this?
And then,
do you need help finding a doctor, or whatever?
Or there's something else that I have seen just be amazingly effective. Have no comment whatsoever. Thank you for sharing that with me. And proceed. So, I mean, going back to that, I just want to feel like a regular person comment, I feel like a normal person around you. Those are the things. Like I have all kinds of health conditions that depends on who you are, if I choose or not to talk to you about, or them or whatever about, but it's not up for discussion. And if somebody has shared that with you, it doesn't mean that you get to have that as currency, have that information as currency.
Right. Yeah, that's really, really important.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. That they've told you, and they've told you only. And so it doesn't need to go anywhere. And it doesn't need to mean that you start policing that person and their activities and what they're doing.
Yeah. I mean, I know everything I've said today, if I had magically disclosed, I mean, it's really nobody's business. If I disclosed whether I was living with HIV or not, would it change your opinion of me? I mean, I think that actually, I'm just going to leave it at that. And yeah, but it's, you know, you have to consider those things, or just think about it, because, you know, if it does, then you might have some work to do around stigma.
I remember one of the, when I was living in Southern Africa, one of the, because they're like miles ahead of us in a lot of ways with regards to like HIV education and support, but also have their own work to do in a lot of ways as well. But there was a children's coloring book that the cover was a picture of two kids hugging, and it said, "My friend with HIV is still my friend." And I just love it. I just love that. It's very simple, and it's like, this person hasn't changed. They're not a different person. There's nothing different about them. They're normal. They're still the same self. They just also happen to have a chronic illness.
Yeah, I have a friend that once had somebody tell them that they were still a good person when they disclosed, and it hurt them. It hurt them because they didn't really know what that meant.
Yeah.
Yeah, I do. I mean, I imagine if I'm using diabetes just because it's something that people live with, and it's manageable mostly. If somebody said that, well, you're still pretty. Like, I don't know, like, what you could say to that. Like, it's just we need to be more careful with our words.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, and it was totally meant with a good intention. Yeah, and I think that's something important too. We should probably talk about, and I've heard you say that if you speak out of turn or term. My mother always says that to me when I was a kid. She used to yell that at me. I don't know which one it was, either term or turn, but if you misspoke, she just yelled it so fast, I can't remember. I said something I shouldn't have. And just to be able to hear, it's like, oh, okay, yeah, I won't do that anymore. And to figure it out and to move on,
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's okay to make a mistake in language. It's okay. But like, just don't make a big deal about it.
Yeah.
Listen to the person who's calling you back in on that mistake and move on from it.
In the 1990s, and this is like a long time ago, I worked as a waitress at a restaurant, and there was this group of people. Oh, hey, there's a kid in the background.
Yes.
Look at you. All right. There was a group of people that used to come to this restaurant all the time, and there was a very, very shy guy who was quite handsome, and guys and their young men, all generalizing people, but this group of young men were very flirty with me, and I always kind of just as a server flirted enough to make a good tip, and then moved on. And this guy was very quiet, and he came up to me one day and he asked me out, and I actually quite liked him because he was kind of just a little quiet one, wasn't being pushy, and I said yeah, and I went out for dinner with him, and he was nice, and he actually disclosed on this first date that he was living with HIV, and I didn't really handle it very well. Yeah, I told him that we could be friends and that I was sorry that happened, and I didn't even give him a chance, and I think about it all the time. And his name was Camden. My mom met him once too. It was weird because she was out on a vacation, but yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean,
Yeah, so I made a mistake, and you know what? I would never do that ever again,
yeah.
because I didn't have information. I've learned something. I've moved on. I still feel terrible about it. I'm talking about it 20 some odd years later.
But yeah, it
We'll
is
make
really
mistakes.
important that we
You don't need to be
recognize those
nailed down
moments.
for it. Yeah, but you can grow from it.
Yeah.
You know,
Yeah.
I have a friend that owns a salon in the city, and she had something written in her building about like keep us safe from blah blah blah. She took her sign down because I had a keep us safe. Let us know if you have HIV or hepatitis C to keep us safe. And I'm like, oh hey, we should have a conversation about this. That is not like something you should write. You should not have that on the wall. Oh, I know I've had this kind of training, this and this. Absolutely. What are you saying, and how are you perpetuating this?
Yes.
Yeah, and it's down, and yeah, she's got some better wording now. Yeah, if you have anything that you'd like to report to us, yada yada, but it was done well. Just strive to do better. It's okay. It's okay to make mistakes.
Yes. Yeah. Yeah, because I mean, if we don't, we of course we're going to make mistakes. We all make mistakes, and if we don't, we're not going to learn from it.
No.
Yeah.
Okay.
Well, thank you.
You're welcome. I don't know
So much.
I talked so much for an
checking.
hour about what I think about everything. I'm kind of curious what other people think, because I can't see the Facebook part.
Well, we actually do have some comments.
Oh, wonderful.
Which is really great. I'm just going to read a couple. What's that?
That F and Jasmine?
Yeah, they're like, oh my God, there she's again talking.
I know. Okay.
No, there's none like that. They're all really, really wonderful and supportive.
Anybody who works in the office with me, I don't shut up. That's why. So it's, if I corner you, I'm going to ask you to do something, and I'm going to tell you my opinion of it. Okay.
No, it's great. Makes it very easy for me as an interviewer.
Yeah.
Say a few words and you just keep going. I'm like, great. Cool. Keep going. It's been very nice. It's been lovely having you, Jasmine.
Yeah.
It's been a great 45 minutes or so.
Mm-hmm.
And we'll see you next time.
Okay. Have a great day, everyone. Bye.
Yeah. Bye.